more.
No, the reason, doctor, let me press you on that, is during the first wave of COVID also, India's always had, India's been the diabetic capital of the world. That's not happened in 2021. Steroids were also being prescribed in COVID-1. Why now? The question is why now? What has changed to make black fungus so prevalent in 2021?
So I think what has changed, if you were to look at it critically, because the virus is the same, we had COVID-19 during the last time also. I think the panic which we had this time as far as COVID is concerned led to a lot of excessive use of steroids. Let's be very frank that people have been using steroids from day one, and this is something that we've been saying repeatedly, that you don't need to take steroids. Even the recovery trial classically showed that when steroids were taken early, it had a worse outcome because it led to secondary infection. And these are all bacterial and fungal infections. So despite us knowing that steroids in the early stage can predispose to fungal infection, especially with the background of diabetes, it can be very harmful. There's also some data coming in which suggests that COVID itself can affect the beta cells in the pancreas, and during the phase of cytokine storm or otherwise also lead to a stage where your sugars tend to be high, and therefore can also predispose to people having high sugars who didn't have underlying diabetes but were borderline and then now start having very high blood sugars.
But I have to ask you this, doctor. You're saying that there is this indiscriminate use of steroids, particularly in COVID 2.0. But who did so? I mean, many doctors have prescribed it. Even All India Institute of Medical Sciences, sir, your guidelines in early April seem to suggest that you will need these antiviral drugs. The concern is that maybe mixed messages went out there. People got desperate. Doctors prescribed steroids. The National COVID Task Force also didn't say right at the very outset, don't use steroids. Everyone seemed to panic. We saw that with Remdesivir also, doctor, that at times, this was part of your prescription manual a few months ago. Now people are saying don't use Remdesivir. Did we get something wrong somewhere?
No, I don't think so. Even if you look at our initial guideline, and these guidelines have been there for more than 6 months, they always said steroids are required only for moderate illness, for those people who are having fall in oxygen saturation or who are having infiltrates on the chest x-ray. None of the guidelines, because this was the data which came out somewhere in the middle of last year, classically showed that giving steroids early would not be of much use. What actually happened was that there were 2 or 3 things. One was a panic reaction. One was a lot of blood tests being done and biomarkers being done. And many people, rather than looking at a person's clinical state or his underlying oxygen saturation, looked at biomarkers. And if they found CRP is high or IL-6 levels are high, they immediately started steroids. So despite the guidelines really not saying that you should, not recommending use of biomarkers to guide treatment. So once you start doing a lot of tests and you find some tests suggesting some abnormality, either the doctor or the patient in panic starts taking drugs which are not indicated. Biomarkers will be elevated in any inflammation. These are what we call acute phase reactant. But if your CRP is high, that is not an indication for starting steroids. But that was what was happening in the last few weeks or months. And that, I think, has caused a lot of use of steroids, which